going to turn the mic over to Tambra Birkebak, my good friend, who is going to present to you Homeschooling on a Shoestring. Tambra.
Thank you. So hello, and my name is Tambra Birkebak, and I'm been homeschooling for over 20 years and just graduated my 4th and last child this past June. So turning a page in our homeschooling adventure. So I had 4 kids, boy, girl, homeschooling all 4 of them since the beginning. So just to let you know a little bit about me and where I'm coming from, so as I speak, you'll catch on to maybe why some of my stories kind of went the way they did. My kids were quite variable in personality and learning styles. I had 3 that were fairly visual, 1 that was quite auditory. 2 were learned to read on a typical schedule, like right when they were 6 or so, like they're supposed to, right? But 2 that were late readers, so 2 of them just didn't catch on quite so quickly. I had 1 with real trouble with handwriting. 3 liked a very relaxed scheduling in our homeschooling, but 1 really enjoyed structure. So as we went along our adventure, we had lots of variety, and if you have them, I probably had some too. Quite a crew there. So as for me, I'm a fairly relaxed homeschooler. That made it easier for me not to feel tied to my school box, and I think that most all of us came from a school background, so we all come with our own school boxes that keep us they give us some tie sometimes to some of the way things are supposed to be done, or what we think of as education and tradition. I think when we're talking about homeschooling, most of us are on a 1-income family. Some of us work some part-time, so that we might have 1.5. Sometimes there's 2, or even a single parent who homeschools. But we're often looking to ways to keep our expenses down. Budgets may be tight, and so some of the ways, there are ways to avoid some of the cost of homeschooling, and I just have some ideas on that, particularly ways to avoid some of the costs that we don't really need, and weighing out some of what's necessary and what's not. And then also some ideas on where to spend the money that you do have, and what is allotted, some ideas on how to prioritize that. So I think in homeschooling on a shoestring, one of the first things we want to do is clarify tradition from need and want from need, or what you think you could use from need. And if you view homeschooling as a lifestyle of learning, then that will really free you up a lot to not be so concerned about what subjects you learn when or what books you use. That way learning is prioritized and not schooling. And I'll come back to that in a little bit later. Actually, if you're looking to homeschool under 6th grade at least or so, probably the thing you need most, is a library card. And a library card can really carry you through a lot of what you need and what you want, and even some of the tradition for curriculum, depending on your library. So I'm going to just take a little stroll down here through our homeschooling on the shoestring, and our first stop is some helpful supplies. I just wanted to kind of cover these because I'm going to refer to them as we go a little bit here and there, so I want you to just have an idea of what they are. And plastic sheet pockets and wipe-off markers, disappearing ink pens and markers. And how we used that was the plastic sheet pockets and wipe-off markers was a way to reuse workbook sheets or workbooks or protect them so that you could use them with subsequent children. If you cut off one side of a protective sheet pocket, then you can actually slide that over the textbook cover, not the cover, but the sheets, and then leave your textbook intact. And that way your student can then write notes on that. They can answer questions. They can do the math. If you've got worksheets or you print off worksheets from the computer, you can actually slide them in those pockets, have them do the work there. You can look at it, check it, whatever you want to do, and then wipe them off for the next use or the next kid. So those can really come in handy. Disappearing ink pens and markers were something that I used quite a bit on particular subjects, such as workbooks that were something that we weren't going to be revisiting a lot. I remember like map skills. We had a really nice map skills workbook that it wasn't something that the kids needed to do again or see again, and so that what they would do is use that disappearing ink pen, and they would do the exercises in that map book, which included drawing, following directions, marking north and south, getting from one place on the map to another place on the map. It was really nice that once they were done with that, I had about 3 days to look at it if I chose to, but the nice thing was that those markings would then disappear. Now there are a couple different kinds, like there's actually ink kinds and there are marker kinds. The markers, sometimes they are water. They disappear with a little water, which is not usually the best for workbooks. The ones I used mostly were the ones that were air disappearing, and I got them in like Joann Fabrics because they used them for quilting and embroidery and that kind of thing. Because it was really nice that you could expose them to air and they would disappear. If you wanted to keep them a few days longer, you could close up your workbook. But if you want it to disappear, you just open your book up and let the air expose. Sometimes I would have the ones with water if I couldn't find the air disappearing, and then I would just take a very slightly damp Q-tip and just run right over those marks and they would disappear. There's also an ink variety that you can get online, places like ThinkGeek. And they actually write like an ink pen, and they too will disappear. They are evaporate by air. So they can really come in handy when you're wanting to work through something, write on something, but yet not use it up. So it's not consumed. You can use it for the next 3 or 4 kids like I did. And then at the end I could resell the book. So that was really, that can come in handy depending on your type of books. You know, it wouldn't work for all types of books, but it was very helpful. But actually, the most important tool that you have to keep costs low is your library card. So there's so much to do in the library and so much available, both in terms, like at King County Library where I'm from, they actually have a lot of textbooks as well. But you can, of course, go find any particular topic and find a book on the topic itself or a collection of something bigger that you can search into and find topics. So you're not going to be without the information. If your child could learn everything in the library book, they would really have no further needs. So almost everything you're going to need to know, even all the way through the high school years, you could find in the library. But particularly if you're talking about like under 6th grade or so, if you're really on a tight budget, everything you need could be accessed with a library card. I have, looking at some library ideas to be a little more specific, of course there's the books in the library, and we got them by the crateful. So we would have one crateful for the house and one for the car, and the kids would come in with me. We would often go on a particular day of the week that stayed pretty consistent. We would spend a couple hours. They were required to get a certain amount of books, and we'd check them out, and then they would be divided between some that went in the house and some that stayed in the car. The nice thing about the car, having some in the car, is that they're a captive audience. And with 4 kids, you know, we had some in soccer and some in this class or that or music, and so there were always books available in a crate right to the side of their car seats. Sometimes we would get a special bags. There were seasons where especially my reluctant reader, we actually went out and bought a specific bag that was her library bag. I found that the bags could kind of fall to the side and be overlooked much easier than the crates, and the crates could be seen in the pictures, so I did like the crates a little better. But anything to get those kiddos reading is the most important thing, is having them accessible. There were library programs like Shakespeare, cartooning, poetry, the things that you would find probably in your local library, and they usually have a sheet near the front door that would say all their offerings, and we took quite a lot of advantages of those, and there's no cost. And you often have people coming in who have a passion for whatever it is they're sharing on. Videos galore. If you can find a book on it, you might also want to look in your video section. What a lot of people don't realize is the videos, the topical videos, are arranged very much the same as your books. So if you are looking for a book on a particular country and you would go in to your library and look in the 900 section, then you could probably would want to stop by your video racks and look in the 900 section, because they are arranged the same as the books are. So it makes it a lot easier to find a video on a particular topic. Box kits, at least in the King County Library System, and kits that teachers can check out. A lot of interesting opportunities there. And King County System had a sheet that would actually define those and what it took to check them out and how long that you could pick them up, keep them. I remember one particular one was deserts, which was really cute. It had some worksheets in it that could be Xeroxed. It had some storybooks. It had a puppet rattlesnake. It had some rubber stamps. It was really a cute little kit that you could learn about deserts with from your library. So check out the boxed kits at your local library as well. For my kids, we did biography a month for the school year. So my kids actually read 9 biographies a month, one for each school year. So that's a really good way. Sometimes I would assign the biographies, and sometimes they would pick the biographies. Totally dependent upon the kids, my goals. So sometimes I gave them a choice. I might pick out 3, and then they would pick one of the 3, and I would just encourage biography reading, both for the history, the information, and knowing information about a real person. The ABCs and the first book ofs, we kind of went through a phase of, we went looking for a first book of World War I, but when you go into the library computer system and you would look for first book ofs, you would see how many first books of tons of different topics that the library had. So we really got intrigued by going through that list of, ooh, first book of soap making. You know, it was really interesting to be able to find these different first book ofs. The same thing with the ABCs. We had a particular book called The ABCs of Early Americana, which was really an awesome book in the library that would have an A page of about 4 or 5 different starting with A items from history, and then a B page with 4 or 5, and C page, and so on. And what my kids would do with that ABCs of Early Americana book was I gave them tracing paper, and so the kids would have to go in and choose an A item and a B item and a C item. So in the end, they ended up with their very own personalized ABC book of Early Americana. But of course, in finding that A item to choose, they actually had to read all the A items and all the B items. So it was really a very good learning experience with the ABC book. But there were also the ABCs of guitar playing and other topics. So we kind of went through a phase where it was really fun for the kids to go find some in those particular areas. Of course, there are how-to books and videos in the library, things such as cake decorating, Janice Van Cleve's Chemistry for Every Kid, which I have pictured here on this slide. And what's interesting, really nice about that book, you pick it out from the library, and then what I would do is I would get one of the little the plastic shoe boxes with tops, and I would, the particular book has these little teeny chapters, like, you know, a page and a half, and it's a small book and it's really big print. But it would first list items that you needed for an experiment. Like chapter 1, I remember in this book, had like 13 experiments on air. And they were really short and simple, and they gave you an explanation at the end. Well, I would give my box to my child and say, let's go find all these items needed for these first 13 experiments. So the kid would probably go on like a treasure hunt and find, oh, we need a straw, and we need some putty, and we need a balloon. And so they would get all the things they knew, and all that I would kind of fill in isopropyl alcohol or anything else that they didn't know what was. And then they could go, we'd set on the calendar once that box was filled with all the items we needed for that set of experiments. We'd put it on the calendar, and we basically have a 2-hour period of 13 experiments on air. It was really awesome. So then they're all excited. I give them the box, and I say, let's go find chapter 2. Oh, it's got 12 experiments on water, or something like that. And so they'd be all excited and go do that. So really they did most of the work, and then I just set a 2-hour period a time set aside on the calendar. It's a great way to keep science, and you could do that once a week or once every other week at no cost besides items from your own home and a book from the library. Scope and sequence matching is, many of you probably know what a scope and sequence is. World Book has a nice scope and sequence that I used a lot early on, but many of your curriculums have one as well, like a Becca or Bob Jones, that basically tells you what they put in their books for a 4th grader or a 2nd grader or an 8th grader. So what you could easily do with the library is to take your scope and sequence that says what the child would learn or should learn in 2nd grade on art, and then you could go and find something from your public library that matched that. And so you could easily scope and sequence matching an entire curriculum for your child and not feel like you've left anything out because you put the same things in either a curriculum company did or what World Book sets forth as something, a typical scope and sequence of what you learned for a child at a particular grade level on a particular topic. So that's just some of the many ideas. Libraries are just such an asset, and really if you're looking to curb your budget, use your library a lot. Moving on to some curriculum type considerations. When you're looking to get a lot of bang for your buck, there's a couple things you want to take into account. If you have a fair amount of kids, you might be interested in a thematic unit study where, bought or homemade, where that you study a particular topic, but you can actually study it with your 5-year-old and your 8-year-old and your 12-year-old all studying the same topic. They may have different interest levels. They may be, their focus may be longer or shorter. There are different activities that you could do with the 8th grader that the 5-year-old might not be interested in. And, maybe the 12th grader could do some writing along those lines or find further research. So the nice thing about a unit study is that you're just getting one thing together. Now that could come from your library, or you can actually buy like a thematic unit like the one pictured on the slide. Is on butterflies, so you could all study butterflies at once. You might buy the book or pick the book out from the library, but it's being used by the whole family, so even if you purchase it, you're dispersing that cost. There are whole curriculums set up along those lines, like Konos or 5 in a Row, My Father's World, Hands and Hearts. These are multi-level curriculums where they're intended for that particular purpose, and very often they will say, okay, we're going to study the explorers, and if, your 1st grader could do this, and your 2nd and 3rd graders could do this, and your 8th grader might be interested in doing that. And so the nice thing is about those is those particular curriculums can, again, be used with a whole family. It also keeps the family together and studying a topic together. There are sometimes multi-subject curriculums and multi-subject books where you have a topic such as butterflies or whales, and there's some math calculations on how much krill a whale will eat, and there might be on weight. So it covers, of course, the science of migration and whale talking and stuff like that. It might have some of the social and cultural meanings of whales for Indians. So a curriculum that might be multi-subject, still centered on one particular theme. There's also the book called like What Your 2nd Grader Needs to Know. And I did have a friend who was a pretty relaxed homeschooler, and they would go through and kind of use that as their starting point, and then they would just kind of chase rabbits off of some of those things. But again, it's when learning is your priority, then exactly what particular topics and subjects and how deep you go into them doesn't matter nearly as much as fostering that love of learning, which multi-subject curriculums can, it's really a good little foundation. I remember we had one for 1 year that we kind of used as a reference, but it covered Uncle Sam, which I thought I would probably never think to cover Uncle Sam, but it had a page on Uncle Sam, and so I thought that was pretty cool. There were pages we didn't like, so we didn't use them. There are sometimes the benefits of using non-consumable text, particularly meaning if they can and will be utilized by siblings, and particularly if they're easy to resell. Things such as Saxon Math and Apologia and Story of the World, these are things that are always in demand. So if they're something that you can use with multiple kids and you intend to resell them and can keep them in good shape, they can also give you more bang for your buck. Totally depends upon your use and what you're looking for out of your schooling at that time. Let me move on here to free and discounted curriculum. Borrow it. And a lot of people forget about borrowing it. A lot of us have homeschoolers, and our kids may be different ages and like 2 years between or 3 years between, and those books just sit on the shelf. So don't forget to, talk to your homeschool support group when the budget is tight, or your churches, your schools, and your homeschooling neighbors to find out what's available. Checking it out, sometimes you have to check those out. I remember at our local support group, we would actually leave a check for the amount of the book. And then when we returned it, they just gave us our check back. If we didn't return it, our check went to repurchase the curriculum. But, for us, it was free. Some of the schools have settings where there was books available. I'm out of the Highline School District, and there is a homeschool resource center there that has many shelves of curriculum books that can just be checked out and used by the homeschoolers at no cost. Use curriculum sales, thrift stores, and garage sales. The only thing is it's beware of those deals, because so many of us have bought so much. Even though they're at a very low price, we get far more than we need. We don't use as much as we have, and they can build up. And so you really need to use your discernment there. And if you think you might use it, maybe you shouldn't buy it. If you know you'll use it, maybe put out for it. But go home and take a look at that shelf and see how big it is. I am not a book buyer. I don't buy much, and still I had a couple shelves of books that I bought. And they were always there for reference, and I did pull them off the shelf sometime, but I can imagine some of my friends who are real book buyers, how big that collection could get. And that will cost you in space. And your husband might not be too happy sometimes with how many books you can accumulate. So be wary of those deals. And I think that's something that comes more with experience. But you take enough low-cost deals, and it can add up really quick. You can find books online. Homeschooling message boards is a good place to look. If you want Story of the World and you don't like the price of getting a new one, you can go onto one of the homeschooling message boards that has places where people post. You'll particularly have more choices at the end of the school year or at the very beginning of the school year. And in the middle, it might be a little harder to find what you're wanting. But you often can find use. And online, don't forget things like Half Price Books has an online site, and Amazon, and places where you can find these used books, sometimes for super cheap. School sales, like I was mentioning, the Highline School District, it has a sale every year where they get a lot of books that they are not going to be using anymore, and they would put them on the shelves, and then sometimes they would be sent books that were being previewed but maybe not purchased, and they would go on these shelves, and every year they would send out a sale sign notice to a lot of us homeschoolers who got on that list, and then we would go to the sales. And workbooks were like 10 cents a piece, and textbooks were like 50 cents a piece, and there were maps and paper and encyclopedias, and way too much for most of us. But we would go in with our bags very faithfully and come out with shoulder pain. So, but that's really a nice place. A lot of school districts, I think, have excess, and it'd be worth your while to see what they do with that, if they have something available, if you're really looking for something along those lines and at a good price. Store and teacher discounts. A lot of stores do give teacher discounts to homeschoolers. Some of them are listed there, and at the very end of my presentation, I have a slide with a whole bunch of them that came off of a website recently that kind of mentions, well, a lot of those bookstores, and a lot of you probably know more. But just something to get you thinking that it could be that the store that you like to shop at, or the one that's close to you, does offer teacher discounts to homeschoolers, and it wouldn't hurt to ask or give an email and inquire about that. Okay, computer-based student learning. That is a very broad subject, and probably not one I'm going to go into a whole lot, because I'm not quite up on all the computer options out there, but I do want to kind of hit the main points, just some of the broad topics. Of course, general research skills is something that our students need. In this day and age, our kids often know more than we do, like mine, who taught me how to make a PowerPoint for this presentation. But our kids need to learn that. So even if they don't surf the web alone, it's something good that a parent can sit down and teach them that general research skills, because they will need that in college. And not to mention just life, when they want to find, a carpenter to make a home repair, or when they want to find who can work on their clutch. So research skills are multifaceted, not only for academic reasons, but for life skill reasons. Computer game learning, of course, is just so broad these days, from reading to typing skills, geography, math, etc. They have games, starting with your pre-K kids, and they go all the way up through high school. And there are plenty of games out there that are kind of geared to the college student as well. Student and parent-centered learning. There's a lot out there designed by colleges and universities. I think perhaps a lot of these college and university students, that is some of the projects that they do for their classes, is actually design student and learning programs. I mean, if you want to know about mitosis and meiosis, you can actually go to some of these sites, and they're very fancy graphics that show you exactly what it is, and you can run it over and over. And there's a lot of virtual labs these days where you click on the test tube, you click on the beaker, you add water to your beaker, you click on the chemical, and then you lift it up with your mouse and pour it into your beaker, all virtual. So it's really a pretty cool opportunity online for some of these things that you may not have on hand, but even a virtual lab is very interesting and eye-catching, particularly for our kids. There are online tutorials that are really some really neat ones. I remember Kodak had a really interesting one, and Kodak had one where it would say, go take a picture of something that was, in your yard, and then it would say, now take a picture of it at 8 in the morning, and take a picture of it at noon, and take a picture of it at 7 o'clock at night. It would say, then it would, send you somewhere else to take a picture of something at 3 inches, and at 5 inches, and at 10 inches, and so on. It would just lead you through all these steps of learning photography and what it means through some of the vocabulary and what happens to your photographs. And it would have places where you would fill in journaling on, well, so what happened? What was the difference of when you took something at 5 inches and 10 inches and 36 inches and so forth? It was really a very good tutorial. Classroom of Physics was a very neat tutorial that I used in a co-op that I was working with some kids, and that was most of their homework was done on this Classroom of Physics tutorial online. It was, and it had a very lengthy outline, so you could pick particularly what you wanted to study, and they would break it down, and it was all these little, very short little pieces that went very well with the students. And then they often had little questions that you could ask, that you could answer, that they would ask. And if you didn't know, there was a button that said, tell me more, and it would tell you more. Learn Spanish, same way. They even had lots of games that the kids could play, matching and concentration and stuff like that. Visual math, Dewey's Drawings, Chess Corner, etc. So there's quite a lot of online tutorials that our kids can learn from that don't cost us anything. Of course, there are some that cost as well, but I was particularly giving some examples of some free ones. Online topic-specific help, such as How Stuff Works, National Geographic's, Khan's Academy. For my students, we had How Stuff Works. My last two would have to, once a week, they would have to go in there and pick something from How Stuff Works and learn it and tell me, and then they would give me a page of either drawings or a diagram or a couple sentences of information. That was actually one of their assignments for the school week, was to find something on of interest to them on How Stuff Works and to learn about it and to be able to put something on paper and tell me. National Geographic has a great site for kids. I had a son particularly excited about geography, and he wanted to do the Geography Bee and did do it several times through middle school. And they have a question of the day, and they have games, and they have quizzes, and all kinds of neat things on National Geographic that's specific to geography, but along with geography is not only maps, but also social and cultural and the political setups and money. So it's really a pretty cool site for kids. And that was also something that my son would have to do. We got signed up for the question of a day, and then he would actually have to either know that answer or go look it up, particularly because he was preparing for the Geography Bee. But it was a great assignment that he did daily. Khan Academy is something that came up just with my last child. I encourage all of you to go there. It is just amazing what this young college student has done on topics galore. It's not just science, but it's on economics and business, on engineering, just amazing amount of topics. And he has them in like very short little 12-minute little videos or something, and some are just something that you click through and read. Everybody should visit Khan Academy and visit it with their kids. There were things that I actually went on there and looked up for myself. And some of the things I thought, okay, I know about this, and I wanted to see what depth he had on those particular topics. So it's not only for kids, it's that lifestyle of learning. And that's good for our kids to see, too, that we are also continuing to learn. Learning functional life and computer programs. So computer-based learning for kids, they all should pretty much, by the time you get to high school level, know how to make a Word document, know how to use Excel and PowerPoint and Photoshop and Quicken. I would say for our kids, being as that mine were older, these were things that they really needed by college, but I think most of our kids most of your kids will probably be knowing these, and at least those even in the school systems know a lot of these coming out. Things like Quicken is a budgeting money program, so that is also a very important life skill for kids to know. Making your own games and projects. I have a section on that coming up here, but that is something that we use our computer for quite a bit. I was really big on making projects and games with information, because then when the project was picked up, if their information was there, it was reviewed again, or it could be reviewed with Grandma and Grandpa. So we did a lot of using our computer skills and those computer programs to make folder games and rhyming games and crossword puzzles and Spanish bingo. And some of these things will come up, but that's a great creative skill for your students to learn to use their computer to make something functional that they're wanting to use. And so today it may be a crossword puzzle, but tomorrow it could be designing their own house. So learning the skills on the computer is important. Parent-teacher computer aids. So let's not say the kids get to do all the learning. And there are plenty on the computer for parents. Free and low-cost unit study websites. So Konos, which is a unit study curriculum, they actually have a website all of their own, and they have ideas and suggestions and message boards where people will say, well, we studied this and we did these things, but we also did this. And so a lot of back and forth and finding other people who did Konos and maybe how they did it and how long it took for them to cover a unit or whatever it is. So Fair and AWOA and Weaver and Amanda Bennett and Cindy Down. Amanda Bennett's Unit Studies and Cindy Downs, they have a lot of free unit studies online. I think they both have some that you can purchase as well. But if you just want to go in there and study, see what they've done for frogs, it's quite likely you can go in and search frogs and find a list of things to do with studying frogs. Sometimes they have handouts or things that you can print off as well, crossword puzzles and such. So free and low-cost unit study websites are a great asset to parent teachers who want to go down that road, or they have a kid with a particular passion they want to follow to find out some specifics. Homeschooling message boards for teaching ideas. Seems like there was a good season in my homeschooling where I visited message boards quite often, trying to, I could ask questions there. I could ask if anybody's ever studied bats, and what they did. I could answer questions there. Oh, they want some ideas on studying nutrition, and so that's a really great place for parents to have access to other parents and to share experiences and ideas on homeschooling message boards. And there's some that are really big, and there's some that are pretty specific, like the ones for like Konos, a curriculum, or there's some that are kind of style-based, like the Charlotte Mason sites that have message boards where parents can exchange ideas. So there's a lot of computer aids for parent teachers as well. There are teachers and teacher sites that also put on lesson plans and thematic study booklets that are meant to be shared across to other teachers. And those are really a great way to get some information on other teachers' experiences. Teacher-created resources is a particular publishing company that publishes resources and booklets and thematic units that have been created by teachers. So that particular site is good, but there's all kinds of Teacher Amy's website, and she may be a science teacher, and then she just can have all kinds of lessons and suggestions on science. And somebody else maybe does the same thing with math games. So checking out your teacher-created websites and ideas. Free student and or parent-centered learning. This one I talked about a little bit earlier, often designed by the colleges and universities. I think I covered that one good there. So yeah, they just often have by topic. But that on the computer, if you can search, you'll find them because they often end in edu. So if you see a site listed there and it ends in edu, it most likely came from one of the colleges or universities. There are free online worksheet sites like teachnology.com, and there are plenty of them out there. Some of them you pay for and some of them you don't pay for, but even the ones that you often pay for, they have a certain percentage that are free. They tend to be simpler, of course, but free nonetheless, and sometimes they're just enough to give you an idea to design your own. Also, there are websites that allow you to make your own crossword puzzles and search and finds and word searches. So those are really neat. A lot of free ones of those as well. Online research, again, is something that a parent can do just as much as a kid, and it's good for our kids to see us do that. Okay. Constructing your own can really keep your costs down. So topical lap books. Lap books are something that kind of came in with my last two children. And they are little like information bites. I got a picture of one there on the slide. That you basically make little mini pictures or booklets that kind of fold and open and twist and turn sometimes. And you arrange them on a file folder. That's actually arranged onto a file folder. They often fold it a little bit different. Sometimes they leave it like a file folder. But lap books are something that your students can make. You can make with your students, and that's best made with your students. They can, make a vocabulary list to put on there. They can have a little booklet that includes some topical information such as what lizards eat, and another little folding book might be where lizards live, and another little, flip-up matchbook style opening might be what eats lizards. So really a neat little way to basically do a report. And the thematic notebooking is somewhat similar, where lap books are often used a little bit more with your younger children or those that really like hands-on, like to cut and paste. Thematic notebooking is a way to do something somewhat similar, but sometimes the older children prefer that, or the auditory learners. They often are not as much in cut and paste, but they like information. So thematic notebooking can be a little more expensive in that it often requires Xeroxing, but in this day and age you can print off the computer. So you're only talking about printer. It used to, we'd have to go down to the copy store and do a lot of Xeroxing. You can see a picture there of our ancient Rome one we did at a co-op, and it had, just pages that we found on the specific topics. You might start with an outline or maybe a table of contents from a book on ancient Rome, and then the student can search out their own information, or you guys can do it together, or it could just include pictures on that we talk about architecture and clothing design of ancient Rome, and feeding, gardening and stuff. It could be very visual as well. It wouldn't have to be a bunch of words. On the bottom there is how we did Washington State history for our last two students, which is on a black notebook paper and a gel pen, and then some cut and paste. That just happens to be the page that says places of interest in Washington. And what we did with that one was I defined kind of a table of contents, and that every open page had to have words and pictures on it. Those that were very auditory, who liked a lot of words, had more words, and those who were very artistic of my children had far more drawings and photos, very visual. So it didn't really matter to me, but they turned the page, and then it might say Indians of Washington State, and they had to fill that page with pictures and words. It was basically scrapbook style, very popular, far better than having my older two outline a Washington State history book. So a lot more fun. If you have a child who's reluctant to do anything, black paper and a gel pen works wonders. And this one I even ran as a co-op, so lots of fun. And it's a type of notebooking, which is a little more scrapbooking style. The nice thing about that black notebook, I got it at Walmart for $1.97. So you paid $1.47 for white paper and $1.97 for black notebook paper, and a few gel pens, and that's so much better, so much more fun, and very low cost. So we did Washington State history. Now most of the pictures you see there were taken from brochures from one of the Seattle hotels, but then we used our library book or had another resource that we gathered information from. Constructing your own goes a long way and really can keep your costs down. Constructing your own in terms of nature journaling. Nature journaling can be for the science kid or the art kid. And perhaps you have your artist. This is how they get science, is that you start doing a lot of nature journaling. They can learn a lot of the vocabulary, be more observant. If you've got a really science kid who may not like art much, but you take it in a science form, then they're much more engaged in doing some art when it has some science, some diagramming, and some putting vocabulary in. So nature journaling, a great way to construct your own. They also have books that you can buy that are kind of geared that way, where they give you a little direction. Okay, go out to, go find some leaves and, press and paste in 20 different looking leaves or something, and then some flowers, draw some flowers, and do some rubbings or whatever it takes there. But you can just take an empty journal and do the same as well. A lot of it depends upon you and your student as to which way would work better for you. Student-made books, a great way to get some creative writing in, a little bit of art as well, or topical writing if there's a particular area of interest your student has. Student-made books, especially these days when you can just type it into your computer and print it off, fold it in half. Takes a little bit of design work there, and that's something else too. If your kid is older, they can help you figure out how to do that. But I ran a workshop for 11 years called called Written and Illustrated By. And that is what we did was the kids would basically form a publishing company, and they would sign a contract that they were going to write and illustrate a book in 2 weeks. And then we would get together in a group setting a couple weeks later, and we would bind them. And then we actually had an author's night out at the local library where the students would read their books. They would be on display, and parents could see. We had refreshments. A great encouragement to get those writers writing. Now the program was actually from a book called Written and Illustrated By, and I kind of tweaked it to what's set for our group. I thought I might do it with my students individually at first, but I really liked the idea that he had of the emphasis being that everybody, if you really want them to write, they need deadlines. If you wanted to write a book, he said, you'd first need a deadline. That's really what's going to give you that incentive. And if you have a short deadline, then you get it done quicker, and it doesn't like drag on and never get finished. And then when you put it in terms of forming a publishing company and voting yourself a president and naming this company and having all the things we went through, it was really exciting for the kids. But I have a whole shelf of very thin little like children's storybooks of Written and Illustrated By my 4 kids. And it's a great little shelf that people get to enjoy still. Constructing your own in way of homemade projects. One of my passions is trying to include information in projects. I'm very hands-on learning. An occupational therapist by profession really made me, or maybe it made me or I made it, but I like doing the hands-on side of putting things together. Trying to get outside those workbooks. So we made a fair amount. Here's a picture of some. And there's a couple books you can see in there that we made little books. One on birds of Washington State, common birds of Washington State, and then the butterflies. And so the tops of those, that little butterfly book had some different types of butterfly, and the bottom half of that little book had like antennas and scales and migration and some of those kind of vocabulary. And we got some stickers from the sticker store and made little butterfly books. There's also a round earth, kind of an earth science book that you can see there. That earth came out of the phone books, and I saw the picture of the phone books and said, hey, we're going to have to make some kind of an earth book. And so that's where that came from, and that's what we did. We made little earth science books. We live in a glacial field of Washington, so we had lots of rocks. So we did a rock study. Just took a piece of cardboard and went down to our beach, cracked up some rocks. That one, took learning a little bit of vocabulary, but it's something we have in abundance here in the Seattle area. Made computer games of Spanish down in the corner of bingo, Spanish bingo. And then you see some whales that were stuffed. Those are stuffed whales. So on the fronts they were a particular type of whale, and on the back it said whale communications or whale migration or types of whales or some information. So it was always important for me to try to have information. But when I see the project of feeding the fish to the pelican, and really that one is also a file folder project where we typed out names of fish, and all those fish that you can see there we decorated with the kids, and they have words with SH on them. So they would read the word and they would feed the pelican. They would read the word and they would feed the pelican. We have all kinds of those games, and one game begot another, and the kids then wanted a piggy bank game, and they wanted a computer game that they put discs in. So it kind of grew on itself. But kids often have a lot of ideas on how you can make a project and construct your own, and they often like doing that. And if they can't come up with an idea, they can probably get some books from the library that have lots of pictures on that particular topic, and they can look through there and see if there's something that they could make and to construct their own. Okay, and homemade games, same kind of thing. I realized I didn't have lots of homemade games. That's since my youngest is 18 now. I was able to pull out a few. You'll see there are 4 folder games that my students made for my kids, and they would actually, there was a fair amount of cutting and pasting involved in all of those from magazines, and one of them is a stamp game. You can see the M&Ms and the Star Trek, the kid really into Star Trek. The nice thing about the computer games that have a path in it, that it didn't really matter what we were doing with that game. We could do spelling with that game. We could do math with that game. We could do learning our presidents with that game. We would just roll, before or after you roll the dice, you just had to spell a word or, whatever it was we were trying to learn. So we could use that game quite a bit. And when they made their own games, that was they were often very eager to play their own games. There was a safe game there. That was another one. We would cut out that safe. We would post it onto a file folder and staple up the sides and cut out those coins that all had a long A and a silent E words. So it was a learning reading game. We did rummy roots with juice lid tops. And so we could play go fish with them. We could play concentration. So we just saved up our juice lids. We had quite a lot of projects that used juice lids. We had tongue blade games that were matching, like the capital Salem and Oregon. So we had quite a bit of tongue blade games early on with my first 2 kids. And then, again, things like bingo. Lots of opportunities to make games. There are whole books designed on math games and reading games for your kids too. You can go to the library and then pick out a game, one on reading or spelling or math games, and then go home and make those. So don't be afraid to try to look at constructing your own. Remember to recycle. Just put that after the constructing, because there was a lot of things that we would use a lot. And so using our workbooks. Our used workbooks were put into a drawer, and so subsequent kids could use them for letter seeking or color seeking or sound seeking to rhyme. So if we went in, if I were working with a younger kid on looking for rhymings like tire and fire, I could probably find these in these other workbooks. Sometimes we would cut out sections of the workbooks that had words, but we wrote our own to match them from the pictures in the workbooks. We did phonics scrapbooking with the younger kids, so we had an A page, and we would go through the workbook and find some A letters, some apples, and arrows, and to cut out and paste, and matching collages and game making. So don't forget that those used workbooks can have a really good function past their filled up date. Magazines, we had the same kind of thing. We had a magazine drawer in our house because at our local King County Library we could purchase magazines really cheaply, And we did a lot with magazines, a whole slew of writing and art concepts and topical magazine use. We did collages and posters with magazines. From magazine pictures, we could take a picture and then write a whole paragraph or a story, you know, a wanted ad, a new caption for a picture. We could use our thesaurus, all kinds of things with magazines. And I call that how to consume a magazine. Not meaning to eat it, but we consumed our magazines really well. It's kind of hard to let go of that drawer not too long back. Newspapers, same kind of thing. Newspapers have a lot in there. I remember one time in our World Book Scope and Sequence, it talked about one of the things that fourth graders did or something was to learn about a newspaper. So we deconstructed an entire newspaper, spread it all around the house, and then we had to put, you know, with the kids, put it back together. So they kind of learned about the different types of pages and sections in a newspaper. And there, you know, we could learn about editorials and editorial comics and weather and economics. So, and when the kids got older, we would collect editorial comics, and then we would write about what was the artist trying to say through that editorial comic. And why did we know he was trying to say that? Because President Nixon's head was 3 times the size of his body. What do you think that artist was, editorialist in this case, was trying to say? So, you know, we could really kind of deconstruct those, or we could write our own opinion on an editorial. So this person thought this, and we might think different, and so we could write why. Weather. There was every Sunday paper had a weather section. We would cut that out, and we would collect that into a folder because we were studying weather, and then we could see what those little red triangles and those little blue half circles meant, and we could compare those week to week and kind of study our weather. We could do statistics on that weather, you know, anything that came from the newspaper. And also there was a little economic. There was always a 1-column long half-page sheet on some economic concept. And when we had an economics guy teaching our kids, kind of like a little class, for the entire 12 weeks that he did that, we would collect our economics note from the newspaper and be able to read that. And then as the class went on, the kids understood more and more of that vocabulary so that they meant more to them at the end of that class, and they had actually something that we could discuss and read about. Because to me, the mastery of a subject means that you know the vocabulary well enough to complete a good conversation with an adult about it. That's good mastery for me, for my kids as they got older. Is, you know, can they talk with Grandpa on the topic of taxation? If they can, then they've got a good handle on that. Some of us would have trouble in some areas, but that for me is what I really looked at, is looking for that vocabulary, and could a student carry on a decent conversation with an adult on that topic. And newspapers were very helpful in that. They also covered, you know, the current events and people and topics that were really up in the social scene and recycling. And so really a nice asset that I think we probably don't use enough, and many of us don't even get these days, I suppose. Books. We reused our books quite a bit. A lot of people don't like cutting up books, but I was not one of those people. We would actually take our books, chop them up, put them into our notebooking, take out pages or chapters or photos. We actually would also cut up our books and do a timeline, perhaps. We did took a piece of, actually it was a roll of wallpaper, and we rolled it up and down our stairwell. And then we actually marked out historical time periods, and we would take a history book that we had specifically chosen for this purpose, that we got from our library, probably for 50 cents, or from that school sale for 50 cents, and we would cut out pictures and things and then place them in their time period so we could see when the Lincoln assassination was compared to the John F. Kennedy assassination. So I know some people don't like cutting up books, but those particular books were far more utilized and seen by my children and appreciated and the information learned than they were if they were sitting closed on the shelf. So we would have some uses for books in terms of recycling in a slightly different manner. And posters. We did a fair amount of posters. And the nice thing about posters and projects with information is that those are pre-writing skills. So a lot of people worry about getting their kids doing some writing. And, you know, my kids the same too. They decided to do Running Start. And my daughter came to me and said, I've probably done 2 reports in my whole life. And I said, yes, you're probably right. That's probably all you have done. However, how many posters and projects with information had she done? The nice thing about those kinds of things is that they involve all the pre-writing skills. You gather information, you prioritize information, you organize information. Those are the really important skills to making a good paper. Writing it into paragraphs at the end, that can come in high school, the last couple of years of high school, or you know, before they go off to college if they're doing Running Start. Yes, that has a place. But in the younger years, those 3 earlier skills are far more important. And if you don't do step 1, 2, and 3, those skills well, what you do in step 4 isn't going to really matter. So keep in mind how good those posters are for our kids and projects with information. Things like juice lids, like I said, we have quite a lot of matching games and learning pogs, and we use them as flashcards. Kids like them. They can roll and spin and clip them together and put them in a little box and put a nail through them and tie them on a string if they want. All kinds of neat little things you can do. So just remembering to recycle. Okay, now we're going on a bit of a roll into collections. Collections are a great way to get kids focused on a particular facet of education. They may have that interest already, but if they don't, or you need a little help and it's something that you're going to learn anyway, think of making a collection. So here I've listed some nature-centered collections. So nature journaling, you know, that can be a collection in terms of photographs. It can be drawings. It can be pressed leaves. And the nice thing about a lot of collections, they can be not only flat, but some that you would box. Maybe you take a picture of, make a poster of, or you make a notebooking, totally depending on your goals with your kids and where you're going and their interests and such. A flower survey is a type of collections that we did with our kids too. You know, what kind of arrangement the flowers were in, the number of petals of the different types of flowers, the number of pistils, you know, pressing flowers. So a flower survey is a good biology type of nature collection that kids can make. And then you have some really nice, if you press them, you can have some really nice art with that as well. Leaf types. There are all kinds of leaf types. A whole vocabulary related to the types of veins leaves have, the arrangement that they are on the stem, their shape, the type of edges they have, etc. So a leaf collection is one we did too with the kids. Seeds, this one was really fun, and this one was a poster. This is how we did seeds. And we did it by the means of dispersal. So we got a poster board and we blocked it off into the 5 or 6 different types of means of dispersal. And then we went to the neighborhood and the parks and we went hunting in the garden and to find all kinds of seeds, and then we would glue them onto this poster by their means of dispersal. So things like if they're a monocot plant or a dicot, the type of seeds and plants, and that's a whole a slightly different study, but it really, you know, what type of seed that is really matters if you're studying some botany. Pine cones. We live in the Pacific Northwest where we have tons of different types of pine type trees and with different type cones and whether they hang down or stand up. So really a lot you can do with a pine cone collection. Rocks, again, we're a great glacial field area in Western Washington, and so we have rocks galore, tons of particularly metamorphic and igneous. We actually have to go hunting to find the sedimentary around here, but they can be found. So you just have to get out your books and your geology of roadside geology of Washington to find them. Shells, seaweed. We did a really nice one with seaweed on the small paper plates, and we made a mobile of that one. Although there's not nearly as much seaweed in the Sound as you get when you're closer to the coast or up in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which we go to every year, and so we gathered our seaweed mostly when we went that way. So the closer you get to the real coast, where you'll find that seaweed, but there's some really beautiful art you can do with that as well. Okay, historically centered collections. I had a son really into coins for a little while. Stamps, got into that. Photos, you can be old photos or copied photos or photos that come from books. If you're looking for photos of like downtown Seattle, historic Seattle, that could be a collection you could make, is going through the books and finding different photos of downtown at different time periods or whatever. Comic books, baseball and sport cards, smashed penny souvenirs, small antiques. These are all kinds of things that would be like a historically centered collections. Stamps is something that they can be historic or topical. I know that when my son was really into stamps, one of my sons, that when we studied something, we would go to the stamp store and find some stamp on that particular topic. Like when we did a co-op class on the American wars, we actually went and found stamps based on each of those wars. And actually one of our projects for one of the Korean War was taken from the Korean War stamp. So it's these kinds of things are too can be a very good way to start or finish a study. So if you're studying a particular topic of butterflies, then you can say, okay, at the end of this topic, when we're done, we're going to go to the stamp store and buy a butterfly stamp. And they're 10 cents and 25 cents. They're really cheap. So a nice way to start and stop a study as well. Okay, art-centered. There's kinds of art-centered. Same way that they can be collected, things that are kind of for your more art-oriented studies or your art-centered kids, your real artistic ones. Like art history paintings, you can often get like posters. You can get them online, but you could put that into a notebooking or onto a poster. You get paintings, pictures from a particular artist or a time period. Examples of art vocabulary. We actually did a class on art vocabulary, which we took magazine pictures, and we would use those, mostly photographs, and we would find the art vocabulary in a photograph, such as focal point, or using color as a focal point, or using texture as a to define a focal point. And so we would go through, I would have some examples of what that looked like, and they would go through magazines and then find other pictures that had that, and they constructed basically their own little notebooking of art vocabulary. Things such as putting your horizon somewhere other than center. So they would go into a magazine and find pictures where the horizon is somewhere other than center. The 2/3 rule, if you know what the 2/3 rule is in art, they go and find a photograph that represented a photograph that's topic showed the 2/3 rule. So, using that was kind of a collection. Poems, writing, and music. You could start with extended family. I know at one time in one of our camping weeks, the requirement was everybody in the family needed to write a poem that week. And so it was a cool little collection. But you could do that with a particular poet or poems on a particular topic, a country, a chosen culture, or time period. Either, poems, music, art, writings, whatever. Handcrafts and recipes from extended family, a country, a chosen culture, a time period. So again, it could be kind of an art-centered collection. We've got some Civil War recipes together and ended up finding one of our distant relatives in one of the cookbooks, which was particularly cool. Finding this or taking a particular photo or a piece of art topic and then doing it in different mediums: watercolor, pastel, pencil, charcoal, chalk, whatever. So lots of types of ways you can do a collection that's kind of art-centered as well. Media options. Channel 9, History Channel, Discovery Channel, and with cable, all kinds of channels these days for learning. Newspaper, again, current events, economics, weathers, editorials, magazines from the library. So another thing that you might consider is shared subscriptions. So if you don't want to put out the bucks for National Geographic, maybe you and the neighbor can put out the bucks, share it, or you and the co-op can share National Geographic subscription for a year, and then you just pass the magazines around, or for Ranger Rick, or whatever kind of magazines suits your need, and then you could share it around. Those kits, Highlights has a top secret adventure book. Well, a lot of us would think of as Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Some of us are a little bit older, but it's that type of thing. There's a whole adventure wrapped up in these books. This would be a great place to use those disappearing ink markers because you're actually figuring out a whodunit as you learn about these countries. They have a book, they have puzzles, they have cards within this kits, and they're a great thing for a co-op or a couple families to share. Teacher-focused publications put out by organizations, zoos, museums, clubs, organizations, societies. A lot of these things have publications that they make particularly for teachers to get them in the door, to get them focused on. They may have kits that you can check out. A lot of times they'll just send you to them. I remember when the zoo had one on the rainforest. It was a pretty nice fat folder, all kinds of ideas. You know, I remember there was one on by the can't remember the tree study, or can't quite remember that one, but something on the trees, and we went to the University of Washington, and they had a whole thing set up for teachers, and then they had a couple days where you would bring in groups on field trips. Free government publications, such as the Department of Education, has a lot of publications that are geared to teachers. The U.S. Treasury Department, you know, all about money and the history of money and understanding the Treasury system and taxation, etc. NASA has a lot. Some of these places also have little hubs at the universities where you can actually go in and get, you know, real nice photographs, such as NASA from the University of Washington. I know we got, but a lot of systems set up for being able to access some of these, and you go in and they're geared for teachers and professors to be able to come into, but they often welcome homeschoolers. Some family, church family options kinds of things. Don't forget your family. In our family, Grandma C likes gardening and nature and hikes. Grandpa C works on cars. Grandpa B plays the piano. Grandpa B is an engineer, so he was good for the higher maths. Uncle N played the guitar and the flute. Aunt Linda, minored in Spanish. Uncle M is an architect. Aunt D is an accountant, etc. Don't forget the families that you have, even the skeptics. You know, when they can be a part of something and see the excitement in your kids and that they're repeating some of these stories, it can really go a long way. Take advantage of those family members who can do a skill to share with your kids. Church missionary programs, mission trips, host homes, support communications. We were with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, for quite a number of years, and so we had people who would come through and tell stories about where they'd been and what they'd seen. So our kids learned a lot about societies and different cultures and poverty, you know, and some geography, geology. Really a neat access to information that came, you know, we didn't go looking for it, came to us, especially because we live by the airport, so we had even more than we knew coming through quite a bit. So being a host home for missionary groups is a great way to learn a lot too. Trading babysitting or house cleaning for another parent, adult sharing. Had a friend who did that. You know, she would teach, and the other mom would, you know, vacuum the lower level of her house and, you know, put a few dishes away. So, because some parents don't like to teach or they don't want to pay, but, you know, trading skills can keep your costs down. Life skills. Don't forget your life skills is a great learning time that costs you nothing, but could mean a lot of help for you. Things like meal planning, prep, cooking, car care, laundry, gardening, carpentry, and home business. Our kids need to learn these skills anyway, and they can learn them earlier than you think. I remember a son who came to me at 10 and said, I want to learn how to do laundry. And so for about 6 months, he kind of went down with me to do laundry and training, kind of an apprenticeship. And by the time he was 11, he was independent and has been so ever since. So got all my kids on that same kind of program. They can learn life skills a lot earlier than you think. And the nice thing about meal planning, prep, and cooking, some of these things can sound like a real chore at 16 and 17, but at 11 and 12, they often think they're kind of fun, so start early. Road and bike trips, roadside geology of Washington, traveler's history of Washington, historical road map posters. Just say vacations at our house were field trips in disguise. We took a trip across the United States on the northern route into Minnesota, where my husband's family was from, down to Kentucky, where my family was from, and back the lower route. And all along that road, of course, we were stopping often, but sometimes we could stop and see something, such as Mount Rushmore, or sometimes we had to pass it by, such as a Devil's Tower. But we'd pick up brochures along that way. When we got home, we made this nice big poster and drew out the United States on it, and we made the map, showed the route we took, and then we cut and pasted all those different places and some information onto that poster. And we had a really neat time reinforcing a lot of that history and those science sites that we saw on our trip. Again, a good avenue. Oops. There we go. Okay, some general community options. Family group lessons versus individual lessons. So a lot of times those can be cheaper. Field trips. Don't forget your field trips. Most field trips, a lot of field trips don't cost things, like the Fremont Bridge Tour. Very cool field trip. Jerry's Rock and Gem. A very cool field trip. I remember at Jerry's Rock and Gem, we actually gave the kids $1 to spend. So they really, when the field trip was done, they paid a lot more attention when the guy was talking. And the Fremont Bridge Tour, they let the kids push the button to raise the bridge. That was really cool. So field trips, there's a lot of learning opportunity in field trips that don't cost you anything. Museum, free, or donation days. I have a whole set at the very last, one of those last two slides again with a whole bunch of dates and places. Most of the times your Thursdays are the days they seem to have a lot of these free days, and sometimes it's just Thursday evening. Sometimes it's the fourth Thursday of the month on the evening or something like that, but it's a good time where you can just give a little donation for a whole family and keep your costs down. Cultural fairs, we have quite a bit of areas in Seattle, the International District, the Scandinavians in Ballard, the Medieval Fair every year in Camlin, Shakespeare in the Park, if you're not familiar with that. Comes in the summer, it's a free. They ask for donations, they give you the opportunity to give a donation at the end. It starts, often like 6 in the evening and goes until after dark, but they're really cool and they're free. Free demonstrations and classes, such as Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith has Saturday and Sunday art demos. I got several artists in the family, and we've been to quite a lot of those. They are free, and they'll demo some particular type of art. And you can find out if you're just interested in pastels, or if you're interested in just in watercolors, or maybe card making. They have quite a lot of art demos that are free. They're about 1 hour, and they're on Saturdays and Sundays. Of course, they offer for-cost workshops as well. Home Depot has free activities, construction, like little build a candle box holder or a toolbox or a bird's nest, a bird house or whatever. REI has some free demonstrations and classes, and then Seattle Free School, which is people who offer classes, many of which are free. Sometimes there may be a little cost, but like on getting started in backyard gardening when I went to nursing homes. Nursing homes often have weekly travel programs or current event programs and holiday parties and such for their residents. So you can get community service and learn about different countries by going and hearing the travel programs. So if you were to go to your local nursing home, find out they've got a travel program. You go in and you help, wheel Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Davis and Mr. Brian down to the travel program. They have a 20-minute travel program that's often from the library or from travel agencies. They learn about architecture and culture and money and all kinds of neat things, you know, and that's a 20-minute, and then they wheel them back to their rooms, and you've gotten great information, and you've provided some community service and some interaction with the elder residents as well. Student exchange programs, we did a little bit of that in the house, never the long-term ones, but even the 4 days or the week-long ones were really a good information for the kids to learn about different cultures, and a great way to go if you have the space. Student-centered community options, lots of these days. Community groups such as 4-H, Scouts, Explorers, Awanas, YMCA, Salvation Army, Boys and Girls Clubs, Community Center programs, Parks and Recs, etc., etc., etc. These are a lot of groups that some are free and some are low cost. Things like 4-H, they, you know, so much available in 4-H. They have these little catalogs of like $2 and $3 and $4 curriculums that, you know, on photography or on soap making or on raising chickens or leatherworking, all kinds of things. I think Scouts and Explorers has a lot of that kind of thing too. Boys and Girls Clubs in Salvation Army and YMCA often run programs particularly geared to having students in the day. Some of these are free and some of these have a small cost associated with them. I remember I had a daughter got interested in fencing, and so there was a Boys and Girls Club actually doing some fencing. That was pretty cool. If you don't find what you want, you can often go to Parks and Recreation and say, you know, I noticed you're doing a pottery wheel, you know, in the afternoons, but we would like one in the daytime for our students, and they're often very happy to come alongside and help you, you know, get something going if you can help them with getting the word out and getting some numbers signed up. So it's really a good keep an eye on what your community groups have going. Even cheaper then is creating your own club for your students' passion. If you got a kid who's really into reading, then have, you know, create a book club, you know, a writing, you know, a weekly writing meeting at a library or some kind of cool place where students writing art in the park, maybe. Chess, geography, stock market club, horses, you know, community service club. Really, things can sometimes be a lot funner with a group that can also keep your costs down. And if it's a club, you can often really get your students stepping up into taking some leadership and some responsibility for that. Other skills that can be learned from creating their own club. Show and shares, contest bees, you know, spelling bees, geography, science fairs, smart groups, reading rainbow, periodic fair. These are amazing opportunities to learn, particularly if you get your student involved in making them, but also even if you don't, going and seeing what everybody else has done. There's a lot of information on display and very cool atmosphere usually. Doesn't have to be highly competitive, but a lot to be learned from participating in show and shares and contests and bees, and even more, and then not to mention just going to them. Don't miss out on that opportunity. Some academic options. Same kind of way with science and history fairs. A lot to be learned from a science and history fair, and usually they don't have costs associated with a lot of them, and they're just on display. Take your time, make a lunch of it, get your kids excited about some of the topics. Colleges and universities often provide free and online courses. I was surprised at how many free and online courses are offered by colleges and universities. A lot of them have to do, they kind of give you a curriculum or they have a book. Some, you know, have more interaction and some less. But it's very interesting to see what's out there, and a lot more than you would think. And then a lot of colleges and universities have free lectures for the public. Like, I know Highline Community College, when my kids were there, had Friday evening lectures every week that different professors would give lectures on whatever their topic of expertise was. I remember one being how, basically the title of it was, how could the Twin Towers fall, you know, in 10 minutes? So it was really the science of how that could happen. It was pretty cool. So check out your college and universities and see. This is something they often ask of their professors to do and to give back to the community. And they don't cost. Take a class from the public or private school on an ancillary basis. Ancillary meaning minute-for-minute reimbursement for a specific subject, class, span, sports, therapy, whatever. Some of the schools offer alt-ed in terms of you lose your homeschool status, so who has some information on that on their website, so really be aware and really pay attention to what you're signing up for and what you're getting yourself into. But there are some options on an ancillary basis, just going for a particular class or just for speech therapy or just to play a sport. I had 3 kids. 3 of my 4 did classes in the public school. Well, one did gym class in about 3rd grade. One did music in about 3rd grade. And one did chemistry and art in high school. Actually a half quarter for each of those. And that was enough for all of them, but just knowing that we can get in there and take a class is a nice option. Just be really aware of what you're signing up for, just so that you don't end up in an alt-ed program and not be aware, because sometimes they're not, unfortunately, as open about that options. Private school extension services, the nice thing about that is that you can actually, if you just need a little bit of help, you can do a lot of it on your own, but you don't want to be totally on your own. You can go to a private school extension service with certified teachers, such as Family Academy, who can you set up just a consultation for an hourly rate with a teacher that will kind of help you maybe choose curriculum or know how to evaluate whether your student is ready for what kind of math. Or perhaps if you want to get some of your high school credits onto a transcript, that's a way to do it without having to go to private school, but you can actually just have some access to a little bit of expertise at a reasonable rate. Things such as CLEP test, AP test, and Running Start. These are things that I won't go into too much, but they can save you a lot of money in terms of college, being that the CLEP test and AP test are things that your student can study for and take these tests and then get college credit. So you save yourself paying college tuition because the fees for these tests are a lot smaller. They can be done through a class or are independent study. The nice thing, one thing to be really aware of is that all colleges and universities do not accept CLEP test or AP. The Washington universities do not accept CLEP test, but some of the other colleges in Washington State do. So you really need to check with your where you think your student might want to go before you choose your testing. And then, of course, Running Start is basically a dual credit system we have in Washington State, which allows our students to take high school at the community college, and the monies that the students would receive as going through the school system actually the majority of it goes on to the community colleges to pay that tuition. So it's a great way to get a couple years or partial years of college credits without having the expense of tuition. You still pay for books and fees, but a great option if your students are ready for that, something you just have to discern with your family and talk to others who've been there before you. Okay, occupational education, volunteering, and jobs. Volunteering is a great way to learn a whole lot, and because it's volunteering, they don't pay, but neither do you. So things at the aquarium, the parks and recreation, greenhouses, the vet's office, the hospital. Find that passion your kid has something interest in learning about, and find a place where they do some of that kinds of things and then offer to volunteer. Jobs, dog walking, soccer refereeing, lifeguarding, babysitting, toddler attendance. These are also kinds of things that teenagers can do that are great learning experiences, both in terms of budgeting, if they actually get paid, and in terms of responsibility and leadership skills. skills associated with whatever area they're working in. Apprenticeships in trade areas or professional areas. And this can be, they can pay, which is not too likely, but you could pay. You could actually go to, you have a child interested in carpentry, and you find somebody who's doing carpentry who's willing to take your student in, and they, may not be interested in paying, but if you say you will pay your student a fee, a $3 an hour kind of pay, then the person knows you're really serious, and they may be more likely to take your student in for a week or two, and which these kinds of opportunities sometimes can lead to where they're willing to pay in job opportunities. So, not to mention the skills, the adult mentoring, etc. Community active youth jobs. And these are some jobs that often are kind of government supported, such as Team Read, where they pair up high school students with second and third graders who are having trouble reading, and they just basically read to them for an hour and a half once a week, and they get paid for it. Job Score Library has these kind of opportunities. A UW nurse camp where they go for a week and are paired up with nurses, and that's free. So there some of these pay, and some of these are free, and sometimes they start free and then they can actually be paid. And there's a website for some of the things that are available in Washington. Hobbies, passion-based learning. Can't say enough about this one, particularly because I have a son who is particularly zealous and interested in something specific, pictured here, which happens to be mushrooms. But it could be ham radios, rock hounding, rocketry, birds, coins, botanical art, stamps, folklore, writing, Seattle Cooking Club, all kinds of societies available. And the nice thing about them is that it's mostly an adult arena. So the benefits, you get really rich experience in these areas, a lot of hands-on opportunities, field trips, adventures, adult mentoring, generosity, future references, and being memory makers. My son being really into coins for a little while, we'd go into the coin store, and the men behind the counter were so excited to see a young person with some knowledge who was really interested, and they just gave him so much and cut costs for him. And then as he got into the mushroom area, there was a graduate student who brought him into the University of Washington and taught him how to make these particular type of studies and how to put his mushrooms into the university herbarium, and eventually invited him to come to his graduate program where this particular graduate student, now professor, was, who is taking him to Thailand and Ireland and all these places to study his mushrooms. So it can be something small, but the adults often are very excited about children with passion, and we'll give them all kinds of tools and assets and books and opportunities that as an adult you might not get. So take advantage of those societies if you have students with particularly passion-based interest. And don't forget your students, if they can initiate their own studies too. Like there was a one student I'm aware of who maybe wasn't the best academic student, but he loved photography. So how he did Washington State history was through photographs. So he would get some pictures from old time, and he went downtown and took a lot of photographs. So that's kind of how he did his Washington State history. My son did science mapping of mushrooms in the Burien Library Park for a year, twice a week, going out and seeing what mushrooms were there and journaling them down. Starting a business, writing a book. These are all kinds of things that our students can do on their own, be very good at, low cost to us. Co-op learning, I think it's pretty obvious. I use that term very loosely. Sometimes it's a few families, sometimes many. Sometimes there are parent teachers, sometimes there's hired teachers, sometimes there's a mix of teachers, some parents, some hired. You benefit from the knowledge and passion of others at low and shared cost, and all benefit from the, I doubled that one. People can benefit from your passion and your expertise. Co-ops I've been a part of all of my life, different ones with different students sometimes, but definitely a low-cost way to learn a lot and benefit from the excitement, the experience, and knowledge of other parents. Okay, to wind down here, just some very important mindset tools that you need to keep in mind. Recognizing that homeschooling does cost. Usually you have less of a second income likely, less kid clothes requirements, less tidy house perhaps, and maybe some less personal free time. And of course, it doesn't need to have much cost in terms of curriculum. We covered a lot of ways that you can get around paying a lot for books and learning materials. Really doesn't need to be that. Recognizing that homeschooling has great benefits, I think a lot of the obvious, the educational freedom and flexibility, fostering of family relationships, discipling your own family values with your kids, and not being tied to the school year are just a few of the many benefits of our homeschooling. Keep in mind that we need to not be limited by our own school box, and I think we can get that's where I think we get a concept and an idea of all the kinds of things we need that we don't. Sometimes it's things we want that we still don't need. Sometimes we think we could use, but we still don't need. So if you're looking at a tight budget and you're wanting to homeschool on a shoestring, get rid of that school box a bit and see learning as far more important than schooling, which is, and as I say, don't let schooling get in the way of learning. We can get too wrapped up into the what books, what subject, how much, how long, and it really doesn't matter, particularly if you're in it for a longer haul. If you're doing it for 1 year, well, you may have a few things to keep in mind, but if you're taking on this adventure for longer than that, really don't be tied down to your schooling. Really jump on board with the learning part and be happy that your kids will not be getting burned out on schooling, because I don't think they'll get as burned out on learning, but they can get burned out on schooling. So make sure learning takes priority any day over schooling. Consider spending your limited dollars in your weaker areas first. So if you really like history, history's going to come your way. You're going to have those books from the library. You're going to find them coming at Christmas time. I just encouraging you to think that if you're going to spend your dollars, that you look at your weak areas or your students' weak areas. For me, that had to do with, grammar or spelling, but, science and art and writing, I was good at. My kids were pretty good at. Math, they were pretty good at, so I didn't bother buying the expensive math book. But the spelling and the grammar, that's where I would invest my dollars, because that is where I would just put off altogether if I didn't have to. So that's where I put my money, and I would just have you, reconsider. Our tendency is to put our limited dollars where we'd like. And I think we'll find that those things come into life anyway. We make them. We make room for them. We find them. We bring them in other ways. And save your money for some of the older years that you really don't need to put into the younger years. You may want that microscope when they're in high school if they're really a science kid. But, you may not need that science curriculum when they're a second grader. Be flexible. Realize that sometimes even free costs too much. Such as when you don't use it, it takes up space. When you don't enjoy it or your child doesn't enjoy it, it costs in relationships. Unwarranted struggles and tears cost everybody patience and can sabotage our learning. And remember that our kids are our best investment ever. If there's anything that we do want to invest in, our kids, we can't go wrong there. So thank you for having me, and I'm going to turn this back over to Debbie, and good luck on your homeschooling on a shoestring.
Thank you, everybody. If there's any questions, you can type them into the question box, and we'll give some attention to those. If there isn't, then we thank you all for attending and hope that you go away from this with some great ideas and tools, which thinking I even did. Tambra, that was great. And I'm done homeschooling. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Okay. A lot of people say thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Where do you get the disappearing pens? Somebody said? Disappearing pens?
I get the disappearing ink pens, mostly from my Joann Fabrics and Michaels in my day, but I also see online that you can pay a little bit more if you want the ones that write in ink, like Think Geek, and there's some other educational places like that that have. So I would go online, but if you're close to a Joann Fabrics or a Michaels, see what they've got. Although occasionally one or the other would only have the type that came off by water, which, like I said, I could use with a lightly damped Q-tip. I could remove that, but I really prefer the air drying ones.
Okay, well.
The other screen.
Oh, okay.
There's two.
There's one more screen here we're going to show you. And I will send you copies of these because obviously there's too much information here. So I'll send these out to all the attendees. There's a question here. Could you repeat the place online again for the pens?
The ones that I remember right off was Think Geek. It's kind of a geeky website. It's got a lot of Star Trek and things, but it does have disappearing ink pens that write like an ink pen and look like an ink pen.
Any suggestions for a first-time homeschooler of a third grade boy?
Well, it really would depend a little. That's kind of a broad question. I would say find out what that third grade boy is really interested in. And one way you can do that is by going to the library and saying, well, what section should we look at? Or get a whole bunch of sections, you pick out a bunch of books and bring them home and then see what books he gravitates to. You might also look up, kind of get a listing of, if you want to break it down a little bit, like in science, what areas of science he's particularly interested in. You could kind of take it by subject level, and you go through the science section. Well, does he really like earth science? Does he like stars? Does he like, animals? And then maybe do writing. What kinds of writing? People who like creative writing don't always like as much topical. Same with reading. Some of us like to read stories and some of us don't. Some of us like to read, history books and nutrition, but pay, you have to pay them to read a novel, which is me. So, yeah, I would say really look for those things that your son is really interested in, and then take those next steps to be his facilitator, to help him further that interest and finding that information until he finds another interest. And then do the same thing with that one. I would say find as many interests as you can and walk him down as many paths and explore as much, and then foster the ones that he gets excited about. And then after a little bit, just let the others slide.
Okay, we're going to sign off here. And again, if you want to refer back to something that Tambra said, we will have the entire webinar up on our website by next week. I will send out an announcement about that, and it'll be there so that you can refer back to it as many times as you need to. Thank you all for joining us tonight and for taking time out of your day to be here with us. Talk to you soon.